Hey guys, it's Sylvia Worsham. Welcome to Mindful Mondays. Today's topic is when responsibility becomes toxic. And this is any value. At any value, you can tip the scales, and when you're operating from a fearful state, you can tip it into where it becomes toxic for you, where you're basically taking the joy out of a situation and operating out of fear and scarcity. And that's usually where you'll see that happening. Well, there's a conversation I had with a coaching client last week where she's an influencer and she loves to be able to show her comments and to respond on her comments. And she asked me point blank, do you think that's my people pleasing pattern of behavior? And I said, not necessarily. That's considered a standard. You have a standard that you operate by, but when you are doing it to please others and it takes away your joy and it's taking your time and energy away from your family, then it becomes a toxic relationship you have with the people-pleasing pattern of behavior. In my case, responsibility, a value that I hold near and dear to my heart, became very toxic after my divorce. And after my first husband asked for a divorce, our counselor, our therapist, basically told both of us, you need to keep your son's environment the same. And in our case, we lived in a really good neighborhood in South Texas, and I ended up keeping the house because he's the one that wanted to leave. And the mortgage was $1,600 a month. And he went to a private school with uniforms and the like, and my husband didn't want to pay for that, so I ended up paying for that. And as a single mom, I took on the responsibility for two parents, and I started working 50 to 60-hour work weeks to keep up with this pace. And where it really became toxic was the lies that my subconscious mind fed me, and the lies that I believed were my truth, and that was that I was not a good mother to my son. And I carried that guilt and that shame for the next 10 years. And it started to spill into my second marriage with my husband and the relationship between my husband and my son. And here's where it became toxic for me. When my husband would try to discipline our son, I would intervene. And as we know, that is a very big no-no in the parenting world, right? And I think a lot of moms make this mistake at times because we get very protective, and it depends on our modeling and what we believe our subconscious programming is. And in my case, I was carrying around this guilt and the shame of believing I wasn't a good mother after the divorce, that I worked so hard and so many hours, and I essentially had abandoned my son. And that was the lie that my subconscious programming or my ego identity had fed me for so long. And I believed it, which was worse, because when you have this belief, it will create this pattern of behavior, this intervening, pattern of behavior, and it will give you consistent results, which will then validate the belief that just keeps the toxicity of the belief going in circles, right? So what came to a head was last year when I finally started writing my book, I started to see a whole new world, and I started to love myself and understand the concept of self-love once I saw myself through God's loving eyes. And then the veil of fear just kind of lifted, and what I saw was totally different. What I saw were the lies that my subconscious programming had fed me. And what I did was I accepted my responsibility. Now I took my power back by saying, okay, I played a role in this, and in intervening with my second husband, because of my guilt and my shame and the lies. And so I'll take responsibility for that. And now I understand that my subconscious programming was behind this, and the lies were not real, right? They were lies. They were not my truth. And I started to appreciate all the good stuff I had done in those years. And what was foundational was my self-love. So that's lesson one that I learned. Self-love is foundational. You got to take care of yourself when you go through a major transition like divorce, like separation, like second marriages, like blended families. All those are transitions, and they can create all these feelings inside of you and all this toxicity, and it can tip the scales. And then what once was a beautiful value can now be based out of fear and become toxic. So once again, self-love is foundational. Lesson 1. Lesson 2, accept your role and responsibility in how you have created this scenario in your household. Understand that you don't know the whole story because you've not dealt into your subconscious programming and how it can be playing a role in your actions. And then appreciate, once you understand it, appreciate all the good that you did do in the transition and focus in on that. And lastly, you know, what that does is that you're able to forgive yourself. Once you accept, understand, and appreciate, then forgiveness is a lot easier shot. And the last and final thing is you always have a choice in facing your fears. You know, last week I faced my fears in chapter 13. I finally finished it. And it's what led me to uncover this programming and these lies that I had created for myself. Once I delved deep into this chapter and started to discuss it with myself and with my audience, the veil lifted once again, and I saw the lies and how I had dimmed my light, because I had even dimmed my light in my accolades at work, in my career, in sales, in my previous career. I had reached the #1 status with Pfizer, and I had never really reveled in that because I had carried the guilt and the shame of believing I hadn't been a good mother to my son. And I had dimmed my own light for 10 years on that accomplishment. And that's not fair to me either. You know, I was also dealing with a lot of pain, but that's how self-love can really help you here. And that is foundational. So once again, this is a straight shot to joy. I'm sharing you my lessons because I obviously took tons of detours through pain, through painful experiences to learn these hard lessons. And if you are going through major transition, this is a straight shot to joy, to learn to love yourself and see yourself through God's loving eyes, accept, understand, appreciate yourself, and forgive yourself ultimately, and face your fears. Face your fears, open up that Pandora's box, you know, feel the feelings as you're meant to feel them, but do it in a loving way. I'm Sylvia Worsham, your host of Mindful Mondays. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's topic on when responsibility becomes toxic. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe. Love you all. Bye now.